I've kept this buried inside for years, but I can't take it anymore. I saw Drake bury something alive beneath the stage on his It's All a Blur tour. It wasn't a prop. It wasn't part of the show. It was real, and I'll never forget it. But before I tell you everything that went down, let me take you back to where it all started. I still remember the day I got the call. I was just another guy working behind the scenes, nothing special, just doing the grunt work. But when I got asked to join Drake's crew for his It's All a Blur tour, I thought, this is it. This is my big break. I'd been working as a roadie, doing setup and cleanup for a few years. Nothing glamorous, but working with someone like Drake, that was a whole different ballgame. You've heard of him, right? Drake, the guy who brought the world hits like Hotline Bling and God's Plan. The one who sold out arenas, got everyone talking. When I found out I'd be part of that, I couldn't believe my luck. I mean, it was Drake. This was my shot. I couldn't afford to mess it up. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have prepared for, was the dark undercurrent that ran through that entire tour, and how it would change everything for me. This was 2022, in the middle of the hype. Drake was at the peak of his career, bigger than ever. The world was watching. The tour was massive, with sold-out shows, packed arenas, and energy like nothing I'd ever seen. Backstage, though, it was a whole other world. I guess when you work for a superstar like Drake, you're not just handling gear and cleaning up after the show. You're dealing with an entirely different kind of pressure. Every detail, every second needed to be perfect. I'd worked with celebrities before, but nothing like this. But it was more than just the spotlight. It was the people around him, the crew. Everyone seemed different. I know that sounds vague, but trust me, when you've worked backstage long enough, you get a feel for things. It's the way people move, the way they talk. It's like a sixth sense. You can tell when something's off. Take the crew, for example. They weren't like the usual roadies I'd worked with. This group moved like they were on edge, like they were all hiding something. No one made eye contact, and the tension in the air was thick. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. People acted like they were walking on eggshells, especially when Drake was around. It wasn't normal. It wasn't the usual celebrity arrogance either. It was something darker, something heavier. And then there was Drake himself. He was different. I don't know how else to put it. He wasn't like the other stars I'd worked with. When he moved through the crew, there was this weight, a sort of quiet command. People scattered when he walked by, not in fear, but in reverence, like he was some kind of untouchable figure. But it wasn't just his fame. It was the way he carried himself. He was cold, almost distant. It wasn't like the usual energy of a performer who thrives on attention. Drake seemed detached, and that made it worse. Because when you're around someone who's disconnected in that way, it makes you wonder, what are they hiding? Now let me make one thing clear. I wasn't starstruck. I've worked with big names before. I'm not one to get caught up in the glitz and glamour. But something about this tour, about the way everything was so perfectly orchestrated, made my skin crawl. I'd been on tours before, worked in huge stadiums, seen performers at their peak, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw that night. I remember it clearly after the show when everything seemed to settle down. the lights dimming, the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor, the hum of crew members talking in low voices. It was just another night. I was heading to the stage to help clean up, move some gear, do the usual routine. But the moment I walked backstage, the air felt different. It wasn't just the usual post-show exhaustion. It wasn't the usual chatter of the crew. No, this time, everything felt heavier. The kind of heavy that presses on your chest. It was like the air was thick with something that didn't belong. I brushed it off at first, told myself it was just nerves. But as I walked deeper into the venue, closer to the stage area, I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Then I saw it. The roped off section beneath the stage. Normally, it's just where they store extra props or equipment. But tonight, the air around that spot felt wrong. It was like it was calling me, drawing me in. And for a second, I froze. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to even think about it. But something inside me urged me closer. And before I knew it, I was stepping past the ropes, moving toward the dark corner where I saw Drake kneeling. I know I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But something made me stay. What happened next? That's when everything changed. But that was just the beginning. I stepped into the space, and for a second, it felt normal. There was that same familiar buzz in the air, the smell of sweat, the faint scent of makeup and hairspray, the hum of the lights above. The stage was still, almost as if it were taking a deep breath before the chaos began again. The crew was wrapping up, packing up the props and costumes, all of them moving in that practiced, mechanical way. Everyone knew their role, no surprises, no drama. But even in this moment of calm, something didn't sit right. The lights were dimmed. The massive arena now a quiet echo of the concert that had just ended. The stage, with its elaborate setup and towering structures, looked almost ghostly in the soft glow of the backstage lighting. The air felt heavier than usual, thick, almost suffocating, and it wasn't just the exhaustion from the show. No, this felt different. It was as if the walls were closing in around me, but I couldn't explain why. I kept my head down as I walked through the back corridors, trying to get to the stage area where I was supposed to do the usual post-show cleanup. The floor beneath my feet was worn, polished from years of crew members walking the same path. The occasional low murmur of voices carried through the hall, but it was almost too quiet, too still, like there was a palpable tension in the air, and I was the only one who could feel it. It wasn't the usual post-show buzz, the light chaos that filled the space. No, this was different. There was no laughter, no joking around. The crew members walked with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, moving quickly but not too quickly, like they were trying to stay out of each other's way. And there, just ahead, was the entrance to the area beneath the stage. The rope was stretched across the space, but there was something off about it. Usually when I entered these backstage areas, the rope was barely an obstacle. A quick glance at the security guard and a nod of acknowledgement, and I was good to go. But tonight, something was different. The rope looked almost deliberate, too intentional, as though it were there to prevent something or someone. I shook off the thought and pushed it to the back of my mind. I was here to do a job. The night was almost over, and I had to get my work done. As I moved closer to the barrier, I noticed the crew members who were usually so lively after the show now seemed distant. I couldn't place it at first, but their body language gave it away. Everyone had this stiff posture, like they were walking on eggshells. They didn't speak to each other the way they normally would, didn't exchange casual jokes or comments about the performance. There were no wide smiles or quick banter, just silence. I couldn't help but glance at their faces as I walked by. Most of them looked tired, exhausted even, but that wasn't it. There was something more. Something in their eyes. Fear. But I couldn't put my finger on it. It was the smallest thing. A flicker in their eyes. A shift in their stance. It was like everyone knew something I didn't. And as I approached the roped-off area, I felt that uneasy pit in my stomach grow. I stepped past the rope, moving cautiously. I didn't want to intrude, but I had a job to do, and this was part of it. I walked toward the stage, toward the darkness beneath it, where I could just make out Drake's silhouette in the dim light. At first, everything seemed so ordinary. The floor was littered with discarded props, remnants of the show. Some stagehands were still sweeping up small piles of confetti, while others were carefully stacking set pieces and moving equipment into storage. But then, something caught my eye. In the far corner, near the stage's base, I saw Drake. He was kneeling, his back to me, hunched low. I wasn't supposed to be down here. None of us were really supposed to be here, but I couldn't help it. I stopped dead in my tracks. For a moment, it felt like everything else in the room went silent. Like time stopped. It wasn't just the darkness beneath the stage or the eerie quiet. It was Drake. I've seen a lot of performers up close. Been around enough celebrities to know what to expect. But Drake, there was something different about the way he was acting tonight. He was kneeling on the ground, his hands moving carefully, almost deliberately. The shadows cast by the dim lights made his movements look like they were in slow motion. There was a coldness in the way he was working. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't frazzled by the chaos of the post-show grind. No, he was focused, intense, as if he had all the time in the world to do whatever it was he was doing. And that's when I noticed what he was kneeling over. It was a hole, a small one deep enough to be hidden from view if you weren't paying attention, but it was there. And something, or someone, was in it. Something alive, struggling. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My throat went dry, and I froze where I stood. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should move closer or run away. Part of me wanted to turn and walk right out of there. I should have, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. The other part of me, something dark, something driven by sheer curiosity, pulled me in. I kept my steps slow and quiet, hoping he wouldn't notice me, but I couldn't stop looking at what he was doing. I should have turned around. I should have called someone. But there I was, moving closer, watching as Drake continued his work, his body still and focused, as if he wasn't doing anything strange at all, as if he hadn't just buried something alive beneath that stage. The air around me felt thick, almost suffocating. I could taste the tension in my mouth. The quiet was maddening. I reached the edge of the stage, just barely able to make out the figure in the hole. It wasn't human. It was too small, too wrong. It was squirming, trying to move, its limbs twitching, but it wasn't getting away. Drake didn't flinch. He didn't stop. He just kept moving, burying whatever that thing was without a second thought. I wanted to scream, to ask him what the hell he was doing, but the words wouldn't come. I felt like I was choking, like the air was gone from my lungs. My feet were rooted to the ground, unable to make another move. I don't know how long I stood there, watching, but it felt like hours. The world seemed to slow down, and all I could hear was the sound of Drake's soft breathing, the quiet shuffle of his hands in the dirt. The rest of the crew had gone. They were all packed up, leaving me alone with that feeling, with that thing Drake had buried. I didn't know what to do next, but my gut was telling me to run. Little did I know, what I had just witnessed was only the start of something much darker. I walked away from that spot beneath the stage with my heart still hammering in my chest. But the unease didn't fade. It lingered, thick in the air, following me like a shadow I couldn't escape. Something about what I had just witnessed felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on why. I had to keep moving, keep doing my job, but the feeling gnawed at me with every step. It wasn't just the strange act I had seen. It was everything that came after. When I passed the dressing rooms on my way out of the area, I noticed something strange. Normally, after a show, the hallways are bustling, filled with crew members talking, laughing, even the occasional celebrity making their rounds. But tonight, there was an odd stillness. It was as if everyone had scattered, like they were avoiding the space I was in. People would glance at me but quickly look away, their faces drawn tight, nervous. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a long night, the tour taking its toll, but the air felt thick, unnaturally so. I brushed past a few crew members who barely acknowledged me. The closer I got to the main hallway, the more I realized I wasn't hearing the usual chatter. No one was speaking. The only sound was the shuffle of footsteps and the occasional rattle of equipment being packed away. I couldn't explain it, but everything felt like it was out of place, like the usual flow of the night had been disrupted. Then, as I rounded a corner, I almost ran into a man I didn't recognize. He was standing in the middle of the hall, just staring at me. He had this cold, calculating look in his eyes. And for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being sized up, measured for something I didn't understand. He wasn't a part of the crew, I knew that. I could tell by the way he dressed, expensive tailored suit, a look that screamed money without saying a word. He wasn't the type to be backstage, but there he was, standing still like he was waiting for something, his eyes locked onto mine for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't the usual glance someone would give as they walked by. No, it was deeper. He wasn't just looking at me, he was assessing me in a way that made my skin crawl. Before I could speak, he tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to read my thoughts, and then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was tight, forced, and there was something about it that sent a chill down my spine. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away without a glance back. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I had just crossed some line. His look, it wasn't just an odd encounter. It felt intentional, as if he was a part of something I wasn't supposed to see, something I wasn't supposed to be involved in. The longer I stood there, the more the feeling of unease washed over me, but I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself that I was just overthinking it. But the moment I turned the corner, I found myself in front of a locked door that I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a door that was usually off limits. It was a back entrance to one of the smaller rooms in the venue. Normally, these rooms were used for storage or quick breaks for the crew, but tonight, something about this door felt different. I tried the handle, locked. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, there were tons of rooms backstage that were locked up. But as I stood there, staring at the door, I realized something. No one had told me it was off limits. No one had said anything about a room being locked, and yet there it was, sealed tight. I could feel my curiosity starting to gnaw at me. I wasn't supposed to be here, but there was something pulling me toward it. I reached for the handle again, but I was interrupted by a quick voice behind me. It was one of the stage hands, a woman named Lisa. She walked past me quickly, not even acknowledging my presence, but as she did, she glanced over her shoulder and caught my eye. Her expression was tight, like she was trying to say something without saying it. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then stopped herself. She just shook her head and walked away, her eyes darting nervously to the door before she disappeared into the crowd of crew members. I stood there, staring at the door, the hairs on my neck standing up. I had no idea why, but it felt like I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this locked room. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or if something was genuinely off, but the more I looked at that door, the more I felt like it was hiding something that wasn't meant to be seen. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. It was like that locked room, the weird look from the man, and the strange way the crew was acting had set something off inside me. I tried to push it all out of my mind to just do my job and get it over with. But the moment I walked back into the main area, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And it wasn't just the locked room or the way the crew had been acting. It was him. Drake. He had been acting differently that night too. At first it was subtle, his body language, the way he moved with such calculated precision as if he was following a script only he could read. But it was more than that. It was the way he kept to himself, the way he isolated himself from the rest of the crew. There was a strange heaviness in his steps, like he was carrying something that no one else could see. I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but I did. I could tell something was wrong. There was this palpable distance between him and the rest of the world. He wasn't just the superstar that everyone adored. No, he was something else, something darker. And I had a feeling that whatever it was, I was starting to get too close. That's when it hit me. Whatever was going on backstage, whatever was happening on this tour, it was way bigger than I thought. There was something hiding beneath the surface, something I wasn't supposed to know, something I couldn't unsee. But that was just the beginning. The next few days were a blur. I tried to push what happened beneath the stage out of my mind, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't. It kept creeping back, that strange feeling that something wasn't right. The crew's odd behavior, the locked room, the way Drake had acted, all of it kept eating at me. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew something was wrong. Something was happening backstage that I wasn't supposed to see. I could feel it in the air, thick like fog, making it hard to breathe. The more I tried to ignore it, the stronger the sensation became. There was a constant pressure in my chest, like I was suffocating, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Then came the real shock. It was another late night after the show had ended. I was doing my usual rounds, picking up trash, wiping down the counters, the normal backstage cleanup. The place was quieter than usual, and for a second, I almost felt like I was the only one left. The arena was empty, the crowd long gone, and all I could hear was the soft hum of the lights above. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. I was walking past the dressing rooms when I noticed something strange. There was a light on in one of the private areas, the one closest to where Drake's crew usually gathered. It was the kind of light that flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows across the walls. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had left it on by accident. But then I heard something. It was a low sound, like a thudding noise, muffled but persistent. It came from the room. It wasn't a typical noise I'd heard backstage. It wasn't the usual post-show clatter or someone packing up gear. It was something else. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what I was hearing. I had no reason to go into that room, but the noise, it was like it was calling me. I felt my feet move before my mind could catch up, pulling me toward the door. My heart started racing, my breath shallow, but I couldn't stop. I knew something was wrong. I knew it. I stepped up to the door, slowly, and trying not to make a sound. The thudding continued, a bit louder now, followed by a strange scraping noise. I pressed my ear against the door, the sound rattling in my skull. It felt wrong. And then, without warning, the door creaked open. It wasn't me who opened it. It wasn't the crew. It just opened. My heart stopped. The room on the other side was dim, lit only by the flickering light above. I couldn't see anything at first, just shadows and dark corners. But then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, but clear enough to make my stomach drop. It was Drake's voice, but it wasn't the usual tone I'd heard on stage. It was softer, almost soothing. But underneath it, there was something else. Something cold. I told you, you shouldn't have come. The words hung in the air, heavy with a weight I couldn't understand. It wasn't just a statement. It was a warning. I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The door had closed on its own, and I was left standing there in the hallway, breathless, my mind racing. I couldn't make sense of what I had just heard. Why'd the door open by itself? Why'd I felt like something was watching me? I tried to shake it off. It was just the exhaustion, I told myself. Just the stress of the tour. But as I walked back toward the main area, the unease followed me like a shadow. I couldn't explain what had just happened. I couldn't explain the feeling in the pit of my stomach. But something inside me told me that whatever was happening, whatever I had just witnessed, was only a small part of something much darker. Then came the real shock. I was about to leave for the night when I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the hallway. At first I thought it was one of the crew members, but when I looked closer, my heart skipped a beat. It was the same man I had seen a few nights ago, the one who had been watching me, the one in the expensive suit. But this time, he wasn't standing still. This time, he was walking toward me. I froze, unable to move. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I felt like he could see right through me. He didn't speak, didn't even smile. He just kept walking, his gaze unblinking, his steps slow but deliberate. When he got close enough, I tried to move, to step aside, but my feet wouldn't obey. It was like I was paralyzed. He didn't say anything, but his presence alone made my skin crawl. The way he looked at me, with that cold, calculating gaze, made it feel like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. He passed me without a word and kept walking, disappearing down the hall. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been waiting for me. I knew something was wrong. I knew I was getting too close to something I wasn't meant to understand. The dread in my chest was growing, sinking deeper with every passing second. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if it was all in my head or if I was really being pulled into something far more dangerous than I could handle. But I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole really went. It wasn't until that night that I fully understood the kind of darkness I had stumbled into. The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface, building day by day, suddenly exploded. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. It started when I was alone backstage again, trying to finish up some last-minute tasks. The rest of the crew had already cleared out, and the arena was nearly empty, save for a few scattered techs and the occasional crew member packing up. I was tired, bone-weary from the tour, but I kept pushing myself through. I didn't have a choice. The work had to get done, and I was the one left to do it. It was the same routine, until it wasn't. I walked past the stage entrance, my eyes scanning the room. The usual backstage hum was quieter now, the shadows growing longer with each passing minute. And then I heard it, the sound that set everything into motion. A low, guttural sound. It was faint at first, like a distant murmur, but it quickly grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the typical sound you'd expect in an arena after the show, no. This was something entirely different. Something wrong. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart starting to race. The noise, it almost sounded like a growl. No, that wasn't right. It was more like the sound of something struggling, something alive, trapped. And then I felt it. A deep, suffocating coldness seeping into the room. The temperature dropped, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My breath, visible in the air, came out in sharp, trembling bursts. I glanced around, but the room was empty. The stage bathed in a faint, eerie glow. Then came the real shock. The sound was louder now. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from, but it felt like it was inside me. Like the noise was trapped in my head, echoing through my skull. And then I saw it. Underneath the stage, where I had seen Drake a few nights ago, where I had witnessed him burying something alive, there was movement. Dark shadows flickered beneath the stage, shifting in a way that didn't make sense. I stepped closer, drawn in by some invisible force, despite every instinct telling me to run. The closer I got, the more I could feel something pulling at me. It was as if the shadows beneath the stage were alive in a way I couldn't understand. The growls and scraping noises grew louder, more frantic. I leaned over the side of the stage, peering into the darkness below, and that's when I saw it. Something was moving down there. Something big. Something alive. At first, I thought it was another crew member or a prop malfunction. But the closer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't anything I could explain away. It was real. A figure hunched over, clawing at the dirt. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Its limbs were twisted and unnatural, its body writhing and jerking in an almost animalistic way. The skin was slick, dark, and as it struggled, it let out a low, ragged sound, like it was suffocating. It was as though it was alive, but not fully alive, something in between. The sight of it made my stomach churn. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like I was being suffocated by the very air around me. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't a special effect or a prop malfunction. This was something far worse. And then, from the shadows, I saw him. Drake. He was standing in the corner of the stage, his back to me. His head was lowered, and he was moving in slow, deliberate motions, as though he was waiting for something, waiting for it to be finished. I wanted to call out, to scream, to ask him what was going on, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't form them. The air was thick with fear, so thick I could barely breathe. Drake didn't acknowledge me. He just kept his back turned, his focus entirely on the creature writhing below the stage. It was like he was waiting for it to do something. But what? What was going on? I backed away, trying to leave, trying to get out of there. But I stumbled, my feet getting tangled in the cables and wires strewn across the floor. I hit the ground hard, my hands slamming against the cold, unforgiving concrete. The noise beneath the stage, the growls, the scratching, didn't stop. It only grew louder, more desperate. And that's when everything changed. Drake turned around, and for the first time, I saw his eyes. There was no warmth in them, no humanity. It was like staring into an abyss, something so dark and empty that it made my skin crawl. He looked right at me, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His gaze was enough. In that moment, I knew. I knew that what I had seen, what was happening beneath that stage, was part of something much bigger than me. Something that had been happening long before I ever stepped onto this tour. And I knew, deep down, that I was in too deep. I couldn't back out now. The creature, still writhing below the stage, seemed to calm down. The growling stopped, replaced by a soft, almost sorrowful sound. It was like it knew its purpose was being fulfilled, whatever that purpose was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I had witnessed, whatever was happening, wasn't over. I stumbled to my feet, my body trembling. The creature was gone, but the feeling of dread stayed with me, like it had taken root inside me. I glanced over at Drake once more, and for the first time, I saw him smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph or joy. It was cold. It was calculating. And in that moment, I realized that whatever was going on behind the scenes, whatever Drake was involved in, it was something I could never escape. And just like that, the weight of the situation hit me harder than ever. Whatever it was, whatever he was, I had crossed the line. And now, I was too deep to get out. I didn't know how to leave, how to escape it. But I knew I had seen something that night. Something that would follow me for the rest of my life. And that's when everything changed. I don't even remember how I managed to get out of that room. One moment I was frozen, paralyzed by the terror of what I had just seen. And the next, my feet were moving, carrying me away from the stage like I was on autopilot. I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to breathe. I just kept moving fast, as if somehow the faster I went, the further I could get from whatever dark force had taken root beneath the stage. I didn't run though. I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to physically break away from the scene that had burned itself into my mind. My body moved like it was still in shock. My thoughts were fragmented, jumbled, but one thing kept repeating in my head. I needed to get out. I needed to leave the tour, leave this place, whatever was happening, whatever I had just witnessed. It was too much for me to handle. As I moved down the hallway, I noticed the crew members. They were still in their usual places, packing up their things, but there was something in their eyes, something different. No one looked at me the same way anymore. They didn't say anything, but their glances were sharp, filled with a knowledge I wasn't meant to have. It was as if they knew. They knew what I had seen. My heart started pounding in my chest. The fear, the overwhelming dread, crept up on me again. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I realized that they weren't just avoiding me. They were watching me like I had crossed into a world I wasn't meant to be in. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to understand what had just happened. But every time I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. I felt like I was suffocating in this silence, this terrible pressure that seemed to weigh down on me. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there, standing in the doorway to the hall, was one of Drake's crew members, Kyle. He was the one who usually helped with the stage setup, the one who knew everything about the tech side of things. He had always been friendly, always joked around with the crew. But tonight, his face was pale, his eyes hollow. He wasn't looking at me like he used to. His gaze was sharp, cold, and there was no warmth in his voice when he spoke. "Get out," he said, his voice low, barely audible over the quiet hum of the venue. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I froze. For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "Get out of here," he repeated, his voice even colder this time. He stepped forward, blocking my path. "You don't belong here anymore." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But the fear was paralyzing. I was stuck in that moment, caught between wanting to flee and being terrified of what would happen if I did. "You saw something you weren't supposed to," Kyle said, his voice barely more than a whisper. He looked around quickly, making sure no one was nearby. "You need to forget it. You need to leave, now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry, and I couldn't bring myself to speak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him what was happening. Ask him what the hell had been going on behind the scenes. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that he wasn't telling me to leave because I'd seen something that was just wrong. He was telling me to leave because if I didn't, something worse would happen. "You don't understand," Kyle said, his voice trembling with something I couldn't place. "They don't want anyone else knowing. They don't want anyone else digging. Just walk away. For your own good." But I couldn't walk away. Not after everything I had seen. Everything I knew now. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead I just nodded, defeated, broken. He was right. They didn't want me here. They didn't want anyone who knew too much. "Go," he said, his voice quieter this time, almost pleading. "Please." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and my mind was a swirling mess of terror, confusion, and dread. I walked to my hotel room, but by the time I got there, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the door. I collapsed onto the bed, my body exhausted, but my mind racing. What the hell had I just seen? And why was Kyle so scared? What was it about this tour about Drake that made everyone act so terrified. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing beneath the stage, the way it struggled, the way it breathed. It haunted me, a constant presence in the back of my mind. The images burned in my memory like a scar I couldn't escape. And Drake's eyes, the coldness in them kept flashing back too. I couldn't shake it. Every time I thought I might drift off, my heart would race again, and I'd be back in that room, beneath the stage, watching the creature writhing in the dirt. I should have left. I should have walked away from the tour right then and there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I knew that whatever was happening, whatever Drake was involved in, it was too big for me to just walk away from. I didn't understand it, but I felt drawn to it. The fear, the dread, it all wrapped itself around me, pulling me deeper into something I didn't want to be a part of. By the time the next show rolled around, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Whatever I had witnessed, whatever was happening beneath the surface of this tour, I was too far in. I couldn't back out. I couldn't turn away. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I thought I could forget it. I thought I could walk away and never think about what I saw beneath that stage. But every time I close my eyes, I hear it. The sound. That low, guttural growl clawing at my mind, refusing to be forgotten. I see Drake's eyes, cold and empty, watching me like I'm a part of something I was never meant to understand. And I know, deep down, that whatever I witnessed, that creature, that darkness, it's not done with me. It's still out there, waiting, watching. I shouldn't have gone near that door. I shouldn't have looked. But now, I can't unsee it. I can't forget what's lurking beneath the surface. And the worst part, it's only a matter of time before it finds me again. Maybe it already has. Maybe it's been following me this whole time. But whatever it is, I know it won't let me go.